The morning sun stretched lazily across the quiet streets of Valmere, a small southern French town where the air still smelled of bread and sea salt. Sebastian Moreau, a 49-year-old real estate magnate known for his polished shoes and colder temperament, adjusted his cufflinks as he walked down a narrow alley. Before him stood a fading tailor shop named Maison Clairette, a place that had refused to pay rent for almost a year. Welcome to Nne'folktales, where we share with you heartfelt stories that will reshape our mindset. Please like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this. The cracked windows reflected his tall figure, and the faded sign swung slightly in the wind. Just a conversation. Collect the rent. Leave, he muttered to himself. But the moment he pushed open the creaking wooden door, the faint chime of the bell broke a silence that felt older than the building itself. Inside, the shop seemed frozen in time, dust floating through golden light, headless mannequins wearing forgotten dresses, spools of thread like tiny tombstones of craft. And then he heard it, a soft whir, steady, rhythmic, coming from the back. Curious, he moved past rolls of fabric stacked like walls, and there she was, a small girl no older than 8, hunched over a sewing machine, her thin shoulders trembling with effort. Her dark hair stuck to her damp forehead. Her fingers, blistered and raw, guided the cloth with the focus of survival. Sebastian froze. "Bonjour," he said gently. The girl flinched. The spool slipped from her hand and rolled to his shoes. She didn't look up. "It's all right," he whispered, crouching. "I won't hurt you. What's your name?" The girl's lips parted, barely a breath. "Isla," she murmured. The name lingered like a secret. Sebastian studied her closely. The girl's dress hung loose, too big for her frame, the hem frayed and stained with something darker than dust. "Isla," he repeated softly. "Does your mother work here?" She shook her head without lifting her eyes. "My aunt. She'll be back soon. I'm not supposed to talk to anyone." Sebastian's chest tightened. "You shouldn't be working this hard," he said. "Do you go to school?" Silence. The only sound was the machine's tired motor winding down. Before he could ask more, the shop door slammed open. A woman in her late 40s swept in, carrying grocery bags. Her sharp features and too bright lipstick gave her the look of someone always ready to argue. "Who are you?" she snapped, dropping the bags. "Sebastian Moreau," he replied evenly. "I own this building. I came about the rent." Her expression shifted, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ah, Monsieur Moreau. Yes, I meant to call. Business has been slow, you understand." She stepped between him and Isla like a guard dog. "And the child?" he asked quietly. "My niece," she said quickly. "She just likes playing with the sewing machine." Sebastian looked again at Isla's hands, bandaged, trembling. "Those look painful," he said. "She's clumsy," the woman shot back. "And she's sick. That's why she's not in school." Isla nodded faintly, her gaze fixed on the floor. Something was terribly wrong. Later that evening, Sebastian sat in his sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the Rhone River. But the image of the trembling child refused to leave his mind. He had dealt with debtors, scammers, and liars before, yet none of them had looked at him with such silent terror. He called his assistant, Margot, who answered instantly. "I need a background check," he said, "on a woman named Lucienne Duret and a girl, Isla Duret, supposedly her niece. Everything you can find, custody records, school registration, anything." Margot hesitated. "Is this about the tailor shop in Valmere?" "Yes," he said, "and make it fast." When the report came 3 hours later, Sebastian leaned back in disbelief. There were no guardianship papers, no school enrollment, no doctor's visits, nothing. On paper, the girl did not exist. Lucienne, however, was tied to suspicious transactions and forgiven debts. Her accounts occasionally credited by anonymous donors. "How does this happen?" Sebastian muttered. His longtime friend and lawyer, Dominic Roux, looked up from the file. "It happens when the wrong people hold power," Dominic said. "She's connected. If you push too hard, you'll step on someone's toes." Sebastian sighed, rubbing his temples. Then I'll need boots. Dominic frowned. You're really going to get involved? You've ignored tenants for years. Why her? Sebastian looked out the window, rain streaking down the glass. Because this time I looked her in the eyes. The next morning, the cafe across from Maison Clairette smelled of espresso and wet cobblestones. Sebastian sat by the window, watching Lucienne greet customers with practiced charm. She laughed easily, the kind of laugh that never reached her eyes. Behind her, through the glass, Isla sat at the sewing machine again, shoulders rigid, eyes hollow. Sebastian clenched his jaw. Every instinct told him to call the police. But Dominic's words echoed, connections, corruption, silence. He needed proof. He spent hours observing, jotting notes. The girl barely ate, barely spoke, and every time Lucienne passed, she stiffened like a soldier awaiting orders. At noon, he approached Henri, the cafe owner, and asked, "Do you know the woman across the street?" Henri shrugged. "Lucienne? Everyone does. Used to be charming before her sister died. Now she keeps that poor girl locked up all day. Folks say it's family business, not ours to meddle." Sebastian's gaze hardened. Maybe it should be. That night, unable to sleep, he scoured old property files until dawn, tracing Lucienne's past addresses, her late sister's estate, and the missing inheritance meant for a child named Isla Duret. The deeper he dug, the darker it became. 2 days later, Dominic arranged a meeting in a small cafe near the town square. Sebastian arrived first, ordering black coffee. Moments later, a woman entered, nervous, eyes darting, hands clutching a worn envelope. "Mr. Moreau," she asked. "I'm Claire Fontaine. I used to work for Lucien." Sebastian gestured for her to sit. "You said you had information?" She nodded, voice trembling. "She's cruel," Claire whispered. "She forces the child to sew from morning till night. If Isla makes a mistake, she's slapped or worse. I once found her asleep under a table with bruises." Sebastian's fists tightened. "Did you report it?" "3 times," Claire said, tears filling her eyes. "The authorities did nothing. Then 2 men came to my apartment. They said if I spoke again, my daughter would disappear." She slid the envelope across the table. Inside were photographs, grainy but clear, Isla working late into the night, her hands wrapped in bandages. There were also letters, appeals for help ignored by the police. Sebastian exhaled slowly. "You've done enough," he said. "I promise you this will end." As Claire left, the rain began to fall again, drumming softly against the cafe window. Sebastian stared at the photographs, the small figure bent over a sewing machine, and whispered, "Not one more day." That evening, the rain hadn't stopped when Sebastian Moreau returned to Maison Clairette. The dim glow from the street lamp cut through the fog as he pushed open the door again, the familiar bell chiming above him. Lucienne looked up, startled, her sharp eyes flicking from him to the clock on the wall. "Monsieur Moreau," she said with false sweetness, "I told you I'll have your rent by the end of the week." Sebastian placed a thick manila folder on the counter, his tone calm but unyielding. "This isn't about rent anymore," he said. "This is about Isla." Lucienne's smile vanished. "What are you implying?" "You've been accessing the inheritance meant for her mother's child," he said coldly. "You've kept her hidden, unregistered, and working like a servant." For a moment, Lucienne's mask cracked. Then she leaned closer, her voice low and venomous. "You think being rich makes you powerful, Monsieur Moreau? You have no idea who you're challenging." Sebastian didn't flinch. "I don't care who protects you," he said. "The judge, the police, your friends. I'll bring them all into the light." Isla peeked from behind curtain, her small fingers gripping the edge. "You can't take her," Lucienne hissed. "She's mine." "No," Sebastian said firmly, stepping toward the girl. "She's not. You just forgot she's human." When he turned to leave, Lucienne's glare burned like acid. behind her polished smile, he saw something more dangerous than anger, intent. By midnight, Sebastian's car wound through the dark countryside, the rain easing into mist. He replayed every word in his head. Lucien's threat, the terror in Isla's eyes. He was halfway to his estate when headlights flared behind him. At first he thought nothing of it, but when the car stayed close, too close, and matched every turn he took, his pulse quickened. "Not tonight," he muttered, tightening his grip on the wheel. Then, without warning, the pursuing vehicle swerved violently toward him. Metal screeched as Sebastian yanked the steering wheel, narrowly avoiding a collision. His tires skidded off the road into a muddy ditch, his chest slamming against the seatbelt. The other car halted a few meters ahead. Through the fogged windshield, he saw a figure step out, broad-shouldered, hooded, a scar running down one cheek. The man approached and tapped twice on Sebastian's window. "Stay away from the girl," he said coldly. "You don't understand what you're getting into." "Who sent you?" Sebastian asked, but the man only smiled a crooked, lifeless curve before walking back to his vehicle. Within seconds, the car vanished into the rain. Sebastian sat there, breathing hard, his heart pounding with fear and fury. He stared into the night and whispered, "You picked the wrong man to scare." 3 sleepless nights later, Sebastian sat in his office, surrounded by stacks of documents and police reports. The lamp cast long shadows across the desk, and thunder rumbled beyond the glass windows. Dominic's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "We've secured a court date," he said. "Emergency custody hearing." But Sebastian, listen carefully. Lucien bought 2 one-way tickets out of the country. Departures in 48 hours. Sebastian rose so fast his chair toppled. "She's running with Isla." "Exactly," Dominic replied. "We'll need a judge willing to act fast. I've already called Magistrate Helene Perrin, the only one brave enough to face the corruption here." Sebastian's voice hardened. "Then let's do it." Within hours, his legal team filed motions, while his private security tracked Lucien's movements. At dawn, he stood at the courthouse steps, drenched but determined. When Magistrate Perrin signed the order barring Lucien from travel, Sebastian exhaled for the first time in days. "She won't get far," he murmured. But inside, he knew the real fight hadn't even begun. The next day, the Montal train station was crowded and buzzing with morning chaos. Announcements echoed, children cried, luggage wheels clattered. Hidden behind a newsstand, Sebastian scanned the crowd, his pulse steady. Then he saw her, Lucienne, dragging Isla by the arm through the platform. The girl stumbled, tears streaking her cheeks. Sebastian stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "Lucienne." She froze, spinning around, her face twisting into feigned distress. "He's harassing me," she cried to nearby travelers. "He's lying. She's my niece." But before she could continue, 2 police officers stepped out from behind Sebastian, badges raised. "Lucien Duret," one announced firmly, "you're under investigation for fraud, child exploitation, and illegal use of a minor's inheritance. Step away from the child." Panic flashed across her face. "No," she screamed. "She's mine. You can't take her from me." "You took everything from her already," Sebastian said quietly. Isla broke free from Lucien's grip and ran straight into his arms. He wrapped her in his coat as the officers restrained Lucien, her screams echoing off the metal roof until they were lost beneath the sound of a departing train. A week later, the courtroom in Lyon was filled with reporters, lawyers, and whispers. Lucienne sat pale and shaking, her expensive suit failing to disguise her downfall. Across the room, Sebastian sat beside Isla, his hand covering hers. When Judge Perrin entered, silence fell like a curtain. The proceedings began, evidence after evidence, photographs, financial statements, witness testimonies. Claire Fontaine's words moved the room to tears. Even the bailiff looked away when the photos of Isla's injuries were displayed. Lucienne tried to argue, to manipulate, to twist sympathy her way, but each lie crumbled beneath the weight of truth. "You exploited a child," the judge said firmly. "You stole her future, her voice, her freedom. The court finds you guilty on all charges." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "You are hereby sentenced to 8 years in prison, stripped of all custodial rights, and ordered to return every cent of the inheritance you stole." Lucienne's defiance faltered. She sank into her chair as the guards led her away. Isla squeezed Sebastian's hand and whispered, "Is it over?" He smiled softly. "Yes, sweetheart, it's over now." When the courtroom emptied, Judge Perrin called them back. Her tone softened as she turned to Sebastian. "Monsieur Moreau," she said, "your dedication has gone far beyond legal duty. On recommendation from Child Services and the assigned psychologist, the court grants you full guardianship, and if you wish, the right to adopt." The words hung in the air, delicate and powerful. Isla looked up at him, eyes shimmering. "Can I call you Papa now?" she whispered. For a moment, Sebastian couldn't speak. His throat tightened, his composure broke. He nodded. "Yes, Isla, you can." A tear slid down her cheek as she leaned against him. For the first time, he felt what he had been missing all his life. Not victory, not wealth, but purpose. As they stepped outside, cameras flashed, but he ignored them all. All that mattered was the small hand clutching his. 1 year later, the Moreau estate no longer felt like a fortress of silence. The mornings began with laughter instead of meetings. In a sunlit kitchen overlooking the vineyard valley, Isla sat at a wide wooden table painting a picture. A small cottage, a tree with pink blossoms, and a man with a kind smile. Sebastian walked in with a tray of warm croissants and placed them beside her. "That's beautiful," he said. "Who's that?" "Us," Isla replied proudly. "You, me, and our home." He chuckled. "Where's the sewing machine?" "Gone forever," she grinned. Her fingers, once covered in scars, now held paintbrushes and books. Her laughter echoed through halls that once only heard business calls. On the wall hung her first drawing for him, a red heart with the words "Merci, Papa." Sometimes Sebastian would pause before it, a quiet reminder of the night he refused to look away. And so, in a world where money often silences compassion, one man chose to listen to the sound of a child's quiet suffering and turned it into a song of freedom. Sebastian Moreau, once a cold collector of rent, became the father of a girl who taught him the true value of wealth, the kind that fills hearts, not bank accounts. Isla Duret, once invisible, became light itself, her laughter spilling out the windows of Maison Clairette, now restored as an art studio for children in need. On its door hung a new sign in gold script, Atelier de l'Espoir, the workshop of hope. And every morning, when the bell chimed and sunlight touched the windows, Sebastian remembered that some debts were never meant to be collected. They were meant to be forgiven. Years later, on a soft spring afternoon, the town of Valmere gathered for the grand reopening of the old tailor shop, now a place reborn in color and laughter. The sign above the entrance gleamed in gold, Atelier de l'Espoir. Inside, walls once draped in sorrow now carried children's paintings, stitched fabrics of joy, and framed photographs of smiling faces. Sebastian Moreau, his hair now silver at the edges, stood quietly near the doorway, watching a dozen children thread needles and cut fabric under bright sunlight. At the center of the room, Isla, now 15, guided their hands gently, her once frail fingers graceful and steady. "Remember," she told a small boy struggling with a crooked hem, "perfection isn't the goal. Love is." Her laughter rippled through the air, soft and confident, a melody of freedom. Sebastian smiled, remembering the trembling little girl he had once found in this very room. Scared, silent, unseen. She caught his gaze and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Papa," she said, her voice warm, "we did it." He rested a hand on her shoulder. "No," he said softly, "you did." Outside, the bell above the door chimed as another group of children entered, their voices filling the air with life. The same sun that once burned on the day he met her now painted the street in gold. As he looked around, the fabrics, the laughter, the courage reborn, Sebastian realized that wealth had finally found its truest form. It wasn't in his estates or accounts, but here, in a place where one child's suffering became 100 children's salvation. When Isla turned to wave at a newcomer, the light caught her eyes, bright as hope itself. And Sebastian thought, sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest power to change the world. Like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this, and let us know where you are watching from under the comment section.